Dr. Fauci did an interview with Mehdi Hassan. Now, Mehdi and I have had our issues over the years. We've fought a few times on Twitter over a variety of things. He was big on the whole voter shaming people on the left if they want to sit out the election or they want to vote for a third-party candidate or whatever. He was huge on, like, you're just a terrible person and you must vote for Biden or else, you know? And he's like he provides the least convincing arguments. He just shames people, which in turn makes them hate him more and make them want to vote for Biden less. So it's just totally ineffective and silly. But anyway, I'm off on a tangent here. I digress, because this isn't about that. He actually does a decent job with a lot of these interviews that he has on his new show, where he asks questions that others in mainstream media don't ask and sort of holds people accountable a little bit. So there's an example of exactly that. He had Dr. Fauci on. Look what happens.
Let me ask you this one other question about the past, because you said we need to move forward. I agree with you. And one of the problems we have now is we have a lot of people, bad faith people, saying we don't trust Anthony Fauci, we don't trust Joe Biden, we don't trust the scientists. But there are others who in good faith, just genuinely over the last year, and I think you've recognized this in the past about the mixed messaging and some of the different advice they've gotten on this very thorny disease. I want to play a clip of you speaking to 60 Minutes just over a year ago. Have a listen.
Now, when you see people and look at the films in China and South Korea, whatever, everybody's wearing a mask. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks. Right now, people should not be there's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
Given you acknowledged in that clip in March 2020 that Asian countries were masking up at the time, saying we shouldn't mask up as well was a mistake, wasn't it? A huge mistake at the time, not just in hindsight.
No, I keep seeing that clip getting played over and over again. So if you could give me 15 seconds, I'll go right back at you with this. Okay, at the time, three things were going on. We were told very clearly at the Coronavirus Task Force, including by the Surgeon General, who's a good person all the way, that there was a clear shortage of masks. And if we went around recommending masks, the healthcare providers who were putting themselves in harm's way every single day would not have enough. Point number one. Point number two, there was no evidence at the time that masks outside of the setting of the hospital worked. There were no data to show that. Number three, we did not know that at least 50% of the infections were being spread asymptomatically, namely by people that had no symptoms. That's the reason why, at that time, I and others made that statement. Fast forward a month or two after, it became clear there was no shortage of masks. In fact, cloth mask works. B, we started to see rather substantial data that masks outside of the setting of the hospital work to prevent infection and to prevent you from infecting somebody else. And three, we found out to our horror that 50% or more of the infections were transmitted by people who did not know they were infected. That's the reason why I changed. So, wait, let me just finish, because you showed the clip. First of all, if something is static and you change your mind about it, you're flip-flopping. If something changes, the data change, and you change with the data and rely on the data, you're not flip-flopping, okay?
Mehdi never said the word flip-flopping, and he didn't accuse you of flip-flopping. I don't know why, his focus became people's perception of him about this. He said, if something is static and you change your mind, you're flip-flopping, but if the data changes and you change with it, you're not flip-flopping. Yeah, but the argument is, when you said it, it wasn't based on the data. It wasn't based on the data. And he kind of admits it, right? His very first point in response to this video being played, this hideous video being played, he says, the Surgeon General, who's a good person all around. What does it matter if the Surgeon General is a good person or a bad person or somewhere in between? That has no bearing on anything substantive. By the way, it's hilarious. He pretends I only care about the data, when his very first comment was like, the Surgeon General who's a good person, so I believe them because they're a good person. I don't know if somebody's a good person or a bad person, it's irrelevant on the truth value of what they're saying. So he says, the Surgeon General who's a good person said there's a clear shortage of masks and we need them for healthcare providers. So you're admitting that when you said, it's not a good idea to walk around without masks, it's not a good idea to walk around with masks, that you were lying. That's what you admitted it without even realizing it, Dr. Fauci. You just admitted that. You admitted that you told a lie. Because you didn't say in the old clip, hey, it's probably a good idea to wear masks, but since we have a shortage, I need everybody to not buy the masks because we need them for our frontline healthcare workers. You didn't say that. In fact, if you did say that, I don't even think this would be as big of a scandal as it is, because people would be like, I mean, yeah, I want a mask, but it's a reasonable thing for one of the leading health officials in the country to say that we might have a shortage for frontline healthcare workers and they should get priority on masks over some random schmuck who barely goes outside, right? But he didn't say that. You didn't say that. Instead, you said masks don't work. And you said it a number of times. That just happened to be, you also said it on freaking 60 Minutes, which is embarrassing. So you said masks don't work. You said don't buy masks, but you just admitted that the real reason was, well, the Surgeon General said we might have a shortage, so we need them for frontline healthcare workers, so that's why you shouldn't buy them. That's categorically different than saying they don't work or it's not a good idea to wear them. That's categorically different. So, funny enough, in his response, he basically admits up front, like, yeah, I was lying. But he doesn't view it that way, which is kind of crazy, right? Like, somehow, it's almost like a Trumpian thing where Trump feels like, if I'm caught in a lie, I could just override it and insist I wasn't lying. Even though it's right there for everybody to see. It's just the insistence that, no, it's not that, even though it literally is that. It is kind of Trumpian, isn't that crazy? Then the second thing is, this one actually pissed me off even more than the admission of basically, yeah, I was lying, without really saying he was lying. He says, well, there's no evidence that masks outside of hospitals worked. Did you really just say those words? I'm just following the data. And so we know that there's data that masks work in hospitals. There's no evidence that outside of hospitals that they work. All right, so let me ask you a question. What if, to deal with the, flow of cases, the surge of cases for COVID, people set up an outdoor hospital? Or they set up a hospital in a former mall which went out of business, and so it's an empty space now. But they can bring in some beds, bring in some equipment, and turn it into a hospital. Would Dr. Fauci say, hey, at this one new outdoor hospital, or at this new previous mall hospital that we've now converted previous mall which we've now converted into a hospital, at these two places, don't wear masks if you're one of the doctors or nurses. Don't wear them. Why? I don't have evidence that masks work outside of the context of a hospital. So the thing was a mall, which is not a hospital. So how do I know masks work in the mall? Or when you do the outdoor hospital, I know you're right on top of and face-to-face with COVID patients, but there's no evidence that a mask works in that context. It only works in the hospital as far as we know from what the data shows. That is the most Weasley bullshit I've ever heard in my life, and you know he doesn't believe that. And you know he'd never say that. Of course, if they converted some other building like a mall into a hospital, he'd be like, all right, we need masks for the workers. Of course he'd say that. The idea, masks somehow only magically work in hospitals, but they don't work elsewhere? They don't work at the bus stop? They don't work in the mall? They don't work in a restaurant? They don't work in a store? How ridiculous! How ridiculous! How ridiculous! Now, yes, it might be the case that particularly outdoors, it's harder for COVID to spread because it's not enclosed, right? Of course. But that doesn't mean that masks don't work in that context as well or help massively in that context as well. What a ridiculous thing to say. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and he knows he's bullshitting. You think he doesn't know what of course he knows what I'm saying. No evidence that masks outside of hospitals work. As if we know if they work in one enclosed space, why wouldn't they work in another enclosed space? It's just beyond absurd. Oh no, we need a study to show that the masks that work in one enclosed space also work in another enclosed space. I know one says hospital on it. The fact that the other one says mall on it, even though they're both enclosed spaces, maybe it doesn't work in the mall. So ridiculous. And he says, oh, we didn't know about asymptomatic spread. So listen, he's a bullshitter. I hate to say it. I know a lot of people out there love Dr. Fauci for whatever reason, but this is bullshit. And he ruined his credibility. And when you ruin your credibility, you undermine science. That's what happens. Because now people don't know when you're saying something that's true and when you're saying something that's convenient and a lie to serve your interests. So the lie he told, you could say, hey, there was a good reason for it because they wanted to protect the frontline hospital workers. Yeah, there was a good reason for it. But you just destroyed your credibility, so now everything else you say, people are going to question. So you could have said exactly what you just said there. Hey, masks are probably a good idea, but we need them for frontline workers, so everybody pump your brakes on buying masks everywhere. That's it. That's it, but he didn't say it. He lied and destroyed his credibility. And now, so I don't get, the other thing I don't understand is the hero worship of Fauci. Why are you doing fucking magazine covers? The guy's been on the cover of 1,000 fucking magazines. He's given interviews to 1,000 outlets. He presented an award at some award show. I don't know what it was. I don't remember what it was. Maybe some Nickelodeon shit or some Golden Globes or whatever the fuck. I don't know. He presented an award at an award show. Why are you going around doing these unserious things when we still have a pandemic that's raging? Ain't no mission accomplished, bitch. This reminds me of Cuomo. In the middle of the fucking outbreak, he writes a book like, how we defeated COVID-19 by not actually defeating COVID-19 at all and having a surge right at the moment as I'm writing this shit and not listening to real experts who know what they're talking about. What are you doing? There shouldn't be a single goddamn magazine photo shoot thing. There shouldn't be any hero worship. There shouldn't be any, like, mission accomplished nonsense or some pats on the back. You've done a terrible job. You were advising Trump. Now, Trump oftentimes overruled Fauci, and Trump is even dumber than Fauci. True. But, like, you didn't do a good job. So it's just, I mean, what a joke. I feel like when it comes to politics and media, there's zero accountability. You fail up your entire life and your entire career. If you're in corporate media and you push the lie of the Iraq war, you're probably still on TV today. You pushed an illegal and offensive war that killed minimum hundreds of thousands of civilians, but you got promoted all along. You know? Apparently in government, and it's not just for actual politicians, you could be a health official who is wrong about one of the biggest things, and you're still treated as some sort of demigod. And here we are. So, you know, I have no sympathy for him. He ruined his credibility. I know a lot of you guys like him. Guys, I really need to try to break you free from that mindset of like, well, he was better than Trump, and so therefore he's good? No, you could be better than Trump and still be a colossal piece of shit. To say you're better than Trump is like saying I'm better than fucking Jeffrey Dahmer. Congratulations. Like, that's nothing to fucking write home about. So get the partisan brainworms out and realize that something like this is inexcusable. You know what? There's plenty of people out there who are experts, who are scientists, who would have never lied about this, who would have refused, who would have said, no, I'm not going to go out there and say masks don't work in the middle of a fucking pandemic. And even, guys, a lot of countries were masking up from day one of this. You want to know why? There are countries that had pandemics previously and they learned their lesson. And we have leaders here who are so stupid that they can't learn the lessons that other people already learned. That masking up is obviously a good idea in a pandemic. They lie about it. They do these incredible lies about it. And then they're condescending towards you when you call out the lie. Fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. What a joke. What a failure. He shouldn't be in this position of authority. Anybody who is willing to lie about that is willing to lie about anything. And that's what you need to take away.